A high-level delegation of Arab and Muslim ministers is visiting Beijing this week as part of a push for a ceasefire in Gaza. The officials are from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Indonesia, the Palestinian Authority, and others. They held talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Monday. Beijing has generally supported the Palestinian cause and has called for a two-state solution. Wang Yi said the world must, quote, act urgently to stop the fighting.
On November 11, the Islamic Arab countries convened a summit to issue a clear and strong statement on the Palestinian-Israeli situation, calling for a ceasefire, protecting civilians, humanitarian relief, and the implementation of the two-state solution. China fully supports this, and we are ready to work with our brothers and sisters in the Arab and Islamic world.
Joining us is Gedalia Afterman, head of the Asia program at the Abba Eban Institute at Reichman University. He was a diplomat formerly based in Beijing. Gedalia, can China really be a peace broker in this conflict, or is that just simply not a serious possibility?
First, happy to be here. I think that China would like to present itself as a serious peace broker in the conflict, but the reality is that so far we've seen mainly talk from China and not a lot of action. And I think most actors in the region wouldn't count on China to be a serious peace broker.
And why is that the case?
I think the case is the issue is an issue of trust and of experience. I think China has shown some progress on the mediator front with the rapprochement that we saw between Saudi Arabia and Iran in March. But on the other hand, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as we can see today, the situation is quite different. And I think that China's actions over the last 5 or 6 weeks have broken its trust or the relationship between China and Israel as well. So Israel definitely wouldn't want to see China or doesn't see China as an honest broker. And I think other countries in the region also are not sure that China has the ability to actually broker a large-scale solution to the conflict.
I want to learn more about that relationship between China and Israel. I understand in recent years, trade had been growing between the two countries. Can you talk about that and whether that will change moving forward, given what's happened and China's statements over the last few weeks?
Absolutely. So I think over the last decade or so, we definitely seen a positive trend in the Israel-China relationship. Trade has been growing quickly. China has become much more interested in Israeli technology. China has been involved in some of Israel's major infrastructure projects. 2022 was a record year in Israel-China trade, coming up to $21 billion US. I think it's also important to remember that Prime Minister Netanyahu was meant to visit China later in October last month for his first visit in 6 years. That visit was postponed because of the war, but I think that's something quite important. On the other hand, on the political front, I think we've seen trouble, we've seen difficulties in the relationship for a few years now. And that's for a few reasons, mainly tensions between the US and China. And also the changing Chinese position regarding the Palestinian issue. Looking forward, I think Israel was quite disappointed with the Chinese response to the current war, and especially to the Hamas terrorist attack on 7th October. I think that will have an impact on the atmosphere in the relationship, especially on the political side. Israel will see China as less of a partner. But on the economic side, I assume that things will resume or continue pretty much as usual.
Now, Beijing likes to position itself as the leader of the global South, and there seems to be some of that happening here. Do you see a great powers game taking place where China's position is primarily defined by its opposition to the U.S. and the U.S.'s support of Israel?
Yes, I think that's a good way of looking at it. I think that when China looks at the current war or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in general, it doesn't really think about or doesn't really care about Israel or the Palestinians. It's thinking about two issues. One, the region, the Middle East, and the global South. And the second one is the Middle East. And when we're looking at what China is doing, its statements, its actions, it's very much focused on how to best position itself within the Arab world, the Muslim world, and how to show itself as an alternative to the US. And I think and I think we're seeing more of that. The issue is, I think, an interesting point is whether or not the recent warming in relations between China and the US, and we saw President Biden and Xi Jinping meet last week, could that have an impact, and could that make the Chinese actually take a more of a positive or a pragmatic position to the conflict?
Gedalia Afterman, thank you so much for joining us.